Good afternoon, everybody. Don Setti here from CYBRI in New York City, along with Paul Cubler. Paul, how are you today?
Not bad, Don. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. This is segment 2 in our Introduction to Penetration Testing series. In segment 1, we covered a general overview. Today in segment 2, Paul is going to dive in deep into application testing. And those cover web apps, mobile apps, desktop, and application infrastructure. So everybody knows Paul from the prior series. Application test, Paul. Maybe tell us a little bit about that and why it might be important to businesses out there to have one of these done.
Yeah. So I think one of the main things is compliance. I'm sure everyone who's looking for an application test has a compliance need, or they're being asked by a customer to have it done. So that's also a very common reason. And the third reason is just ensure that your application is secure. Not everyone, let's say, handles sensitive data, but still it's good practice to ensure that, the application that you have is secure. You don't want to have your name damaged or reputation tarnished because someone got into your application and, instead put, profanity all over the place, which is unfortunately more common than people believe. And you also don't want your application being taken advantage of. That's also, business still needs to run.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about that. I see you have their authenticated testing. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that might be important?
Yeah. So that's actually a good question because we often get asked that when we're discussing a pen testing scope. And, everyone goes, well, I want this to look like a hacker's doing it. I want that real hacker simulation because that's the real world. And, they want to give us, the quote unquote black box test. They just give us no information and say, go at it. And really, the authenticated testing adds another layer of testing because one of the things a lot of companies don't think about is what if a hacker's gotten in, or what if a hacker has stolen credentials, or just even what if you have a curious or malicious user who wants to do some damage after they've already authenticated themselves in, and it's a really good way to find flaws, especially in the business logic where I might do something unexpected and elevate myself, and going back to having stolen credentials, it's extremely common for credentials in large breaches, like the Verizon breach or Facebook, for users to use the exact same email addresses and passwords. And now a hacker will go and take that and go into your application. So you want to test it from really all angles to make sure it's working perfectly, not just the, here's no information, see what you can do.
And so on the application side, there's obviously a development life cycle, a product development life cycle for various upgrades and features, et cetera, et cetera. When are good times to perform these tests?
So yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of, your cost benefit analysis, the earlier the better. Obviously you're really going to testing it at fairly major phases, but as new code is developed, you probably want to integrate a security check into there. Usually that's done internal. You don't always need, someone like us to come and do that, but have a dedicated person who's not writing the code, who's just reading it and ensuring it's secure. So that way, anytime you have a feature update and you're committing the code and publishing it, you're getting that checked. And now where we come in is if you have a staging environment or a QA or something like that, where, you've made major overhauls to it or you've added new features and you want us to come in and break things before you make it live, that's a great part. And then always, that somewhere in there, you're going to want to test it live on the production network and systems. And so, that might be something you only do annually with the QA testing that's happening like maybe quarterly or as part of your release cycle.
Great. That's fantastic, Paul. Desktop apps and app infrastructure, are they still, a lot of them still around or are they kind of getting chased out a little bit or what?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think they're going away. Web apps are taking over, but it's not to say that these standard desktop apps, the ones you double click on, don't exist. There's still plenty of them that are there, and especially a lot of them that do very important things, especially things that have been custom made by a company that have existed for
A lot of
20, 30 years.
legacy type
Yeah.
of stuff, right?
Yeah, and the big challenge with that is not only is it going to be legacy programming languages, like real languages, programming changes, but also, there's a lot of other complicated things going on, like how is the code and the data being stored? How is it being transmitted? It's very often that these were developed without a lot of security in mind, especially since they're often legacy. So
Yeah.
it's something that if you have one and you haven't had a test in a few years, I would go and do that unless you've had no major changes at all, which might be. But if Windows is going to release new operating systems every few years, then you probably want to go and check that, or Linux or whatever you might run on.
Gotcha. That's a great point. And from an application infrastructure perspective, are those is that infrastructure tested often along with the web? Are there differences in what you might find? You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in terms of how often you're testing the infrastructure, I'd say it's probably, if you're getting an annual pen test, you might want to couple it with that. If you're getting, more than annual, so maybe a quarterly, you probably once a year, unless there's major changes or you're releasing into a new type of infrastructure. So plenty of people have migrated, let's say, from AWS to Azure, and so that's something where you might want to get a test, or if you're releasing anything that's like quite expansive. But in terms of the findings, they're going to be quite different, because these are often more of a look inside from what the DevOps team might be doing. So this is something where we're going to have an account that's read only, and we're going to take a look and really see if your IAM or your identity and access management is properly set up. That's a huge problem. A lot of breaches happen because that's poorly set up, and find things that really a pen test isn't necessarily going to find. They're not vulnerabilities that can be quantified in the same way, because if an account has access to something, that's not a standard vulnerability where a scanner might check it, but a person will say, well, why does the firewall have read access to this credit card data?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
interesting. That's great. That's great. So Paul, I really appreciate your time today, sharing your thoughts and perspectives on penetration testing, and we'll come back in a future segment 3. I believe we're going to be talking about either social engineering or cloud. I'm not sure which one we have coming up next, but hopefully it'll be a fun conversation.
Yeah, sounds good, Don, and I'll talk to you then.
You got it. Thanks a lot, Paul. Have a great day.